This is a Sessions video tutorial using Live Paint.
In this tutorial, we'll take a look at Live Paint. Live Paint recognizes empty areas of space created by objects or paths and applies color to them, even if there are gaps along path edges. You might be thinking that's all well and good, but what am I talking about? In Exercise 1, you're asked to create a robot using basic shapes and line elements that are discussed in the correlating lesson. As some of you may have found out, Illustrator doesn't do so well at filling in areas of space created by separate lines or arcs or other open shapes. Here, I've drawn 4 lines that are loosely assembled into a square. You and I can see this as a square, so the logic goes, we should be able to fill it with color. But when I select all 4 lines and try to apply a fill color, I get nothing, even though the fill box in the toolbar shows a fill color. Illustrator doesn't see things as we do. Rather, it just sees 4 individual lines, and that's it. It doesn't recognize the space within the lines as something it can fill, at least not by default. And this is where Live Paint comes in. To get Illustrator to recognize the space within the 4 lines, I need to convert them into what's called a Live Paint group. To do this, I'll select the lines, and then I'll click on the Live Paint bucket tool in the toolbar and move the cursor over my selection. The selection should highlight in red, and you should see a click to make a Live Paint group message, so that's just what I'll do. And with a click, Illustrator now sees the space between the lines as something it can fill. So I'll select a fill color and click within the square to fill it. As you can see, nothing's changed. The reason? It's the gaps I've purposely made on some of the corners. Illustrator prefers connected paths with no gaps, but there's a solution. I'll take a quick trip to the Object menu, then to Live Paint, and finally Gap Options. In the dialog box that appears, I'll change Paint Stops at Small Gaps to Paint Stops at Large Gaps, just to be on the safe side. If you have really large gaps, select the Custom option and enter a value that you think will work for you. The caveat on this, though, is that you can only go as high as 72. If you still can't fill in your selection, you'll need to edit it to make the gap smaller and then try again. I'll click OK and try to fill in this shape once more. I've already got my fill color set, so I'll just click once inside. And there's the color. Have you noticed the 3 boxes above the Live Paint cursor? The color in the middle represents the color you've selected to fill in a shape. To select the colors on either side, though, use the right or left arrow keys on your keyboard. You can cycle through a handful of colors that can normally be found in the swatches palette. This makes color selection a lot easier. If you see only one box above the cursor, click on a color in the swatches palette. This should make 2 other color swatch boxes appear around the middle one. To disable this feature, double-click the Live Paint bucket tool and remove the check from Cursor Swatch Preview in the dialog box that appears. Since we're here, I want to mention that you can also paint the strokes on your objects. Just enable Paint Strokes. There's also options for changing the highlight color and size of a Live Paint group selection. I'll click OK to continue our look at Live Paint. Let's say you want to add some lines or shapes to your Live Paint group. To do this, just start drawing your lines or shapes you want to add. For demonstration purposes, I'm adding in 2 more lines to make 4 boxes within the square. Now I'll select all 6 lines and go to Object, Live Paint, Merge to combine the 2 new lines into the existing Live Paint group. You can also click on the Merge Live Paint button in the control panel. Okay, now I can color in the 4 squares however I want. A neat feature of Live Paint is that you can move the paths and the fill will readjust to the new space. Note, however, that if I move some of the paths, such as one of the original lines, too much, the gap will become really large and I lose the fill color that the line was containing. A quick undo command returns things to normal. 2 other features to point out are Release and Expand. Release will release the Live Paint group along with any fill or stroke colors you've applied to it. You're left with pretty much the basics you started out with. To get to this command, select your artwork and go to the Object menu, then down to Live Paint and Release. I'll undo the Release command and show you what Expand does. Alright, now I'll go to Object, Live Paint, and then Expand. The artwork is no longer a Live Paint group, but it did retain the fills I chose. I'll run the Ungroup command until it's no longer active in the Object menu. Then I'll deselect the artwork, and finally, with the Selection tool, I can now click and drag the individual squares around. And there you have it, an easier way to paint objects in Illustrator.
Did you like this video? Then subscribe today to stay up to date on our channel or follow us on Google+, Twitter, and Facebook. Visit sessions.edu for more info on classes and admissions. Also, don't forget to check out the links to free downloadable content in the description. Thanks for watching.